People sentenced in the 80s to 2000s. What modern world change shocked you the most? I remember getting the bus years ago and this old bloke got on heading away from town center towards the more residential areas. Without a second thought he sparked up a cigar. One of the passengers told him you can't smoke on a bus. He apologized and quickly stubbed it out but said he got discharged from prison that day, and when he went in you could smoke anywhere you wanted, so this was a massive culture shock to him. Prisoner transfer I did one time for this man who was sentenced to life in 1968, and it's the first time he'd driven past the CN Tower in Toronto and he couldn't believe how tall it was. That and he was blown away by how many different car brands there were. Do you know what he was sentenced for? Also, I wouldn't be able to handle a life sentence then see all the progress made without me while being transferred. It would mess with me too much. He was sentenced for sedition, treason and I think espionage dating back to the Cold War. Not sure what he did exactly per se, but he's never gonna walk for it. My cousin's husband, that she married while he was serving 10 years beginning around 2008, wanted the first thing he did as a free man was to go to Hollywood Video and rent movies to watch with her. Then she blew his mind with Netflix. At least the idea of Netflix and chill wasn't far from his original plan, but he was shocked about there not being video stores anymore. Not my personal experience, but a man I worked with after he was released from prison after being sentenced as a young adult was blown away by the touchscreen ordering at Wawa and could not fathom why the employees could not take an oral order from him. I remember when I was about 8 or 9 using my first touchscreen in an office my friend's mum worked in. It was crap and hard to use. I thought it was amazing and futuristic. I often think back to that moment and marvel at how much they've improved and how I used one every day. Knew a guy who was blown away by digital cameras. He had purchased an old, terrible one and couldn't get over how amazing it was. Cameras truly have come a long way, and hear people on Instagram trying to find 15 years old cameras for aesthetic. My friend's older brother was jailed in 1994 and served 15 years. He said when he went in, anyone with an in-car phone was super rich, and to then see absolutely everyone have a completely cordless, pocket-sized phone was amazing. He also said that all the TV adverts had websites to visit, or were for completely online stores, which were a bit of an alien concept, as he'd never really seen or used the internet. He also found the chip and pin process of paying for things on a bank card extremely exciting. Got a call from a woman filing a claim on some abandoned funds. I got all her information and then asked for an email address and she said, "What's email? I keep hearing about it, but you've got to understand I've been in prison a long time. I'm honestly surprised there aren't mandatory classes in prison that help keep people up to date on current events and technologies. It would go a long way to help ex-cons function normally in society once they get out, and isn't that the whole goal of the prison system?" Not me personally, but we had an older guy rent out a room in our house a few years back. Usually we rented it out to students, but someone let us know that he had just moved to our city and needed something temporary until he found permanent accommodation. It was a bit frustrating because this guy would not use the internet to search for a car or place to live. Didn't know how it worked and didn't trust it. We tried to help him learn how because we thought he was just old and stubbornly resisted technology, but nope. Turns out that he had spent 11.5 years in maximum security prison after being framed by WA police for murder in the mid-90s. Came out with trust issues and a dislike for the new internet. Edit: Western Australian, not Washington police. And here's his Wikipedia page for those interested in his case. I was talking to a lady who runs the education for a federal prison in Florida. She said when they start getting rambunctious or off topic, she mentions a new feature of the newest iPhone and all of a sudden they're very interested in what she has to say again. Obligatory, not me, but in the early 2000s I worked with a guy that was sentenced in the mid-80s and had just come out. He told me the first time he went to a men's room he spent several minutes looking for the handle to flush. Motion sensor toilets was completely alien to him. How kids toy becoming so creative and better. Hey, I used to play dirt and running around like chimpanzee. I hired a guy that was released after 17 years, circa 2005. A week after he started working he bought a phone. He had a childlike wonder with push-to-talk and texting. A week later he was pissed off that he couldn't text his order into Hungry Howie's. No longer having to go to a friend's house to play video games together. And the fact that everyone has cell phones now means you don't have to go to a friend's house and hope they're home. Also, computers. Everyone has some sort of computer in their home or access to one. I remember being told that I needed to learn cursive because all your papers are done in blue or black ink in cursive once you get to high school. My mom taught me cursive in first and I never ended up using it because my school started teaching us how to type in 3rd grade. By the time I reached middle school, we were turning in typed papers. I never give money to beggars, because in Dallas, Texas, I've been told the same story by the same ones time and time again. However, there was one who was fresh out of prison and seemingly honest with me because there was no sob story, just a guy trying to get up, around 2013-ish. He came up to me and said, and I quote, "Ma and I just got out of prison. Been in there since 97. All these people walking around with cameras in their phones trips me the f*** out. Anyway, this fool over here says I can smoke this fat ass joint with him if I bring $2. Can you help me out?" His honesty and comedic timing train of thought made me laugh. That's the only stranger I've ever happily given money to. I was pretty surprised at the rise of e-commerce. I never thought it would be more convenient than a brick and mortar store. I was sentenced to some community service in 1997 for a traffic violation. Not me, but one of the most astounding changes I hear one of my dad's friends talking about is how having big asses was shameful and all models were flat. Now it's the other way around. So makes a lot's impact, I'd assume. Weed's legal now. It would have to be frustrating to say the least to get out of a long sentence for weed and drive past a dispensary. At college, I bumped into a guy at a bus stop who did 20 years and had just gotten out the previous week. He struck up the conversation by talking about cell phones, and how it was that we could talk with anyone by staring at a computer we could fit in our pocket. The concept baffled him. I had to explain the concept of why texting can be easier than calling. He told me that the thing that surprised him most, however, was how awful it was to watch the news. He hadn't been able to watch TV behind bars, and so was amazed and disappointed at how partisan and ridiculous news shows had become. Reading a lot of these comments is quite weird. In prison in Denmark, the inmates have television and gaming consoles, radios. They can get information from the outside world, the news and so on. Also, why is it, in American movies, when someone is being visited in prison, they only have like 1 minute or so to talk, and some guy walks over and says time's up, let's go. Visiting time is apparently barely a minute. Must suck to have many visitors. And then we wonder why, after they get out, they're unable to function in a changed society and wind up back inside. There was that documentary of someone who was sentenced in the 70s, Otis I think, and he just couldn't believe the stuff he was seeing. Since he lived in New York, with all the screens it was just a different city than all the different colored drinks and people wearing earphones like they were in the Secret Service. It's an interesting thing to watch. I asked a friend what the hardest thing was for him readjusting to being free again. This is a roundabout of what he said. Closing doors. I'd leave the fridge open every time without fail for months. You are not allowed to open or shut anything for yourself, and I'd accidentally let the pets outside by forgetting I needed to close a front door someone else had opened in front of me. You forget the last one in roulette and have to learn it all again. What was the thing you found you liked the most? Candy Crush. Gets phone back out and starts playing. 5 minutes later exclaim they've leveled up excitedly. So sweet. My dad would always tell me stories, like how he got out, walked into Walmart, and ended up crying because he didn't have to ask to use the restroom. A couple other family members did really long time and couldn't use the bathroom without asking permission. Obviously not the same thing, but in my school in the last 2 years you no longer had to ask permission to use the bathroom. You could just get up and go. Everyone felt like they were breaking the law for the first couple of months. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking the video and subscribe if you want more Ask Reddit.